Hello and welcome back to the Beardworks Podcast for episode 7. Nick, how you going, mate?
Yeah, pretty good. Playing lots of games this week.
Yeah, it's been a pretty game-heavy month for us, and that's the topic of today's discussion, is that we got two heavyweights of the PlayStation 4's final life, I guess, just before the PlayStation 5 is released later this year. So obviously, first off, we're going to be talking about is The Last of Us Part 2. And our thoughts, review on how we felt the game played out and what our final thoughts will be. So, Nick, first off, what did you enjoy about The Last of Us Part 2?
I pretty well enjoyed it from start to finish. Like, we've talked a lot about it off podcast, but I feel like there was a lot of necessary things that happened in the game, a lot of changes that need to be made, and they made them. Like, it's had mixed reviews. We've all seen the people kicking up a stink online, but I feel like everything we've played has been what we should have played.
Obviously, guys, spoilers ahead for The Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2. Obviously, we're assuming that if you're listening to this, that you have played The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2. So, yeah. So, obviously, from the first game to this game, there's a 4-year gap, and I think it shows a bit more mature themes throughout it, showing that Ellie's not she was an innocent little girl in the first game, but she's grown more, and she's more of a stronger and prominent character, and is obviously the lead, well, half the lead in this game. And so, how did you feel about them killing off Joel so early in the game?
Definitely shook because I really liked Joel in the first one. Like, he was a bit of a highlight for me. But there would be no Last of Us 2 if Joel was alive. He had to die.
Yeah, for sure. They built it up, obviously, playing as that random character, as we know now as Abby, in that first little period of the game, and finding out, well, not knowing exactly what she's there for, but when they were talking about some kind of character that they wanted to draw them out, you had a feeling it might be Joel, because we don't really have much information on the other characters they've brought into The Last of Us Part 2. So to have them kill off Joel quite early was a bit of a shock, but I don't think it was a bad decision, because I think they needed to drive the game forward, and what better yet to kill the main character than from the first game, starting with Joel, obviously, and then killing off other characters throughout the game. Joel obviously was the big character that everyone wanted to play as, and having him get knocked out of the game early, I think it was a bit of a pill for swallow to some of the gamers, especially the YouTubers that played the game.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of sooking online about it, but it's just a death in a game. It's just like watching Game of Thrones or anything. Like, you never know who's safe. It was a good decision. I'm glad it happened.
Yeah, it drove the story forward, and obviously from then on you play on as Ellie for the first half of the game, which I found Ellie's gameplay really fun and enjoyable. I think her and Dina's interactions are really good. They're not Joel and Ellie level of like dialogue and connection, but you can tell that they're trying to build that relationship and to show that it's really there. And so the little time period that you play as Ellie and you're hunting through Seattle, which is, I think, a great backdrop for this game. It's just a really cool city. Half of it's sunken underwater. There's forests like areas. Just a really cool city, and it's like it feels like it's alive, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like with all the different factions kicking off, like the Scars and WLF, like it definitely feels like a populated environment. And yeah, I just wish we got to see a few more cities in this game, but I think Seattle was more than enough.
Yeah, I think if you compare it to the first game was a bit of a trick, as in you would go through many areas and over a long time period as well. So you could actually see and go through different levels and see where parts of the world had gone to, not survived so well. But that's the thing that I found different between the part 1 and part 2, is that in part 1 you were going through these levels and it was bits and pieces. Like, you had the hunters, which were the main bad guys, and then you had the infected. And so you got through those little areas, and they were cool, the overgrown like areas, because it's 20 years. Obviously, the first game's based 20 years after the first the infection. So obviously things are gonna be overgrown. So finding those little areas, and especially when you go out to see Tommy's place, it's cool to see like what happens when men aren't around, as in as a, like, not so much communities, but like as a, oh, I can't think of the word for it, but it just shows you that if everything stops for a little while, like how much of it disappears, like of the old world in this game. And so when you go to Seattle, it feels like it is a very living and breathing city that it is overgrown, but there is plenty of people around. Whereas in The Last of Us, in the part one game, it was more just, nice scenic routes with enemies spread out, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. They took the environments into much more consideration in the second one than they did in the first one.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest problems, obviously, we spoke about is having Joel being killed off early in the game, but people were asking and saying Joel wouldn't trust these guys, like all this kind of stuff. He's gone soft. When you think about it, if you compared Joel from the first game to the second game, in the first game, it's always back against the wall. You're trying to survive and he's trying to protect Ellie at all costs. Whereas in the second game, I found that he'd been settled now in Jackson for, I think it was obviously 4 and a bit years. And it wasn't about killing people on sight. It was more like befriending them, trying to survive. So that was just my little bits and pieces I want to put in there, saying that, people change over time. And obviously Joel changed a little bit. And you can see that he was trusting. It cost him his life. But you can see as soon as he realized that he was in danger, after he got shot in the leg, obviously, that he went straight back to his savage kind of state, saying, let's just get on with it. Like, he was ready to go. And like I was saying earlier, that every dog has their day, and it's a bit of an eye for an eye. And unfortunately, it was Joel's time. So having him get killed off was an interesting aspect. I think it worked well for our experience. I think it did. And Ellie's first part of the game, I think, like we said, we spoke that Seattle was just a great environment, but the graphics, this is pushing the PS4 to its max.
Yeah, I wasn't even playing on a PS4 Pro. Like I had a 4K TV and everything, but wasn't even on a Pro, and it still looked incredible.
Yeah, and so I think it's a good way to finish. Obviously, the game that we're talking about after this, that's another beautiful looking game. But The Last of Us Part Two, sorry, took the graphics to its absolute max, and it looked beautiful in most areas. And I find that the character models are really good, and the facial expressions were just top tier.
Yeah, like that scene where you can go into the mirror as Ellie and like play with their faces. Like it just shows you that's just a flex of their facial like rig and animations.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually like the little safe challenges. They were kind of cool. It actually makes you walk around the world and search, and you find little notes and bits and pieces of the old world of what happened way back when the infection first broke out. It's just a really cool, immersive way to bring people around and enjoy the game, I think.
Yeah, finding the safe codes and stuff I found pretty easy, but it's definitely worth doing. Like there might be a little bit time consuming some spots trying to find a code, but the upgrades you get from them, like I don't know how I would have got through the game without getting like all the scrap and ammo from safes.
Yeah, the ammo is pretty scarce in this game. Obviously, you do find bits and pieces on characters, but this game in general isn't meant to be a shoot 'em up kind of game. It's meant to be like sort of like stealth, sort of like the similar to the first game. But I find that it's a bit easier to die in this game, I found.
Yeah, the shooting is like I've heard people say that it's difficult stuff, but it's the same as Uncharted. Very similar with the bow to Horizon. I felt like because I've played Horizon the last month as well. Like I feel like the mechanics are very similar, if not identical. So
Yeah,
I adapted pretty well to Last of Us. But
yeah.
yeah, like when people are rushing you, it's easier just to cave their head in with an axe or something than like try to quick scope them.
That's the same thing I was saying earlier, is that when you have like a cluster of enemies, whether it be infected are the main ones, because with enemies that like human enemies, they can shoot. Like there's people that have bows, they have guns, and they also have weapons. You have a couple melee guys running at you, and you have people shooting at you as well. You sort of have to prioritize who you take out first. So I mean, the melee guys, you can normally just like dodge and hit once, and if you got a heavy weapon, you can put them down one hit. And then obviously, you need to sort of weigh up who you go for next. But I always found that was it was good. It was a good challenge sometimes when you had a lot of enemies. But in saying that, I love doing the stealth part, just like sneaking around and just picking people off one by one. And if push come to shove, then you could pull out your weapon and start firing away. But that was good fun. Obviously, the game is enjoyable enough to play, and the mechanics are good enough.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if there was any mechanics I didn't enjoy in that. I think the stealth was very subpar. Like it tells you can hide in long grass and stuff, but if someone gets near you and you're hiding, it's all over. And they see you from across the map sometimes. Like sometimes I was caught out and I thought it was absolute bullshit when I definitely shouldn't have been caught out.
Yeah. No, I can do agree. There was a few times when I got caught out, and I didn't think that was I was in a position where I could be found. But overall, I found the gameplay enjoyable, and the stealth part was, yeah, like I said, maybe subpar. It might not be as good as other stealth games, but it was good enough. I think The Last of Us, it's not meant to be a perfect, like, I mean, you're playing as Ellie, who's like an 18, 19-year-old girl at the time, who's, seen and done a lot of bad things in the world, but is not like a Sam Fisher.
Oh yeah, imagine Sam Fisher in The Last of Us. Be unstoppable.
Um, but yeah, so overall, Ellie's story very interesting. Obviously, she's driven by revenge, which we can understand, obviously, from killing Joel, but I don't necessarily agree with. I think that Joel wasn't a great person. Obviously, in the first one, it's so easy to get behind him and do and agree with what he does because he is the hero of the story. That you only see it from one side of the story, and in this game, it really shows from both sides of the story, that both sides of the conflict, as you could say. And I think Ellie's driven rage to find and hunt down Abby and her friends. If you take a step back and maybe realize maybe Joel wasn't the best kind of guy, and obviously he tried to do the right thing by her. And yes, I do agree that at the end of The Last of Us, saving her was the right decision. But in a world where there's infections and you have a chance to save millions and millions of lives and return society back to what it was, I feel like he made the wrong decision. Not saying that it's a tough one, but we didn't get to make that decision. So obviously his input from the first game has changed the course of these two characters, being Ellie and Abby, to where they are in this game.
Yeah, I've said it before. I'll say it again. There's not really any good guys or like bad guys in Last of Us universe. Everyone's just out to survive. So it's hard to like say someone's good, someone's bad. But I feel like in this game, Abby and Ellie both in the wrong. Ellie more in the wrong than Abby.
Yeah, I think when it came down to it, when you do kill Abby's friends, they're not the best kind of people, but the thing is, they're just trying to protect their friends. So you have to understand. And obviously, all we're seeing is from Ellie's side. And then obviously, the reverse is when we play as Abby, and you find out that Abby isn't that terrible of a person for what. I mean, obviously, she took Joel down, but that's because, spoiler, Joel killed her father, who was the surgeon in The Last of Us Part 1. So you have to understand that she's lost her only family to this man that was sort of doing a selfish act. So you can't really. I know it's hard for people to understand, but you have to look at it from both sides of the view, as both sides of the story. So obviously, after what she's done, um, Ellie's hunting her down, picking off her friends, and obviously Tommy's doing the same thing. So that was a cool aspect I found. That was also on touching on Tommy, is that you're sort of following behind his carnage, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, this game reminded me a lot of Lord of the Flies. Have you seen Lord of the Flies? That
Yeah.
old movie? It's
Yep.
like how fast, when there's no society involved, how people can go to savagery.
Yep.
And yeah, it mirrors the Lord of the Flies very well. So it was a good comparison. But
Yeah, if you're comparing it to that's obviously the book and the movie, it is very true that without law and order, things go to shit pretty quickly. Obviously, this world has been this way for such a long time now that it's stuck in that way, but it does show that people can change, and I think it really, really shone through was when Owen was talking about how he was attacking a Scars camp or Seraphites camp, and he hit this old bloke on the back of the head, and the old bloke didn't didn't go for the gun. He just sat there and was ready to accept his fate. He was old, withered, like he was ready to die. And that's a very interesting point, is where he sort of like chose not to kill him. He sort of backed off, and then his teammate or his partner at that there, like Danny, I think his name was, obviously pointed a gun at Owen. They had a bit of a scuffle. He got Owen shot Danny. Danny goes on to bleed out and die, but tells his teammates that Owen's betrayed them, and now that's the hunt going on. That's whole Abby's storyline from there. But it just shows that obviously when Owen and Abby are talking in the boat, he's just like, Owen's over it. You can tell that he's just sick of like fighting for things that don't really matter in this world.
well, he's got a bit of a perspective change when his girlfriend is pregnant. He doesn't want to like keep doing his bad ways. He wants to kind of support that and get out of the like dangerous lifestyle.
Yeah. And I don't exactly agree with Owen all the time. Obviously he's not a great character, and neither is Mel, but and obviously Manny, who was another character that Tommy had killed as well right in front of us, which was pretty brutal, which is interesting. Wasn't as brutal as Joel's death, but still interesting. The story portrays itself as, like you said, there are no good guys in this world. There's only bad, and it doesn't matter if we're on Ellie's side or Abby's side. They're both in the wrong, and it shows. Obviously, when Jesse arrives to help out, and they all agree once they get Tommy back, they think this is like Abby's obviously not off doing her own thing. In the meantime, Ellie's killed off some of her friends, which Abby doesn't know about, and they all agree to let Abby live. And I was like, okay, so that's obviously a good outcome. I think they're sort of giving up on the revenge story, so they've done enough damage. They've taken out a lot of their people, but these people had nothing to do with it. Like, I know that those characters were involved around Abby at the time of killing Joel, but it wasn't. They were just there as support for Abby, not to do the actual deed. So to have them get killed off, I understand they wanted revenge, and everybody, like Tommy and Ellie, whoever, like the ones who saw they were there, they didn't care. They just saw red. They just want to know that those people suffered as well.
Yeah, it's a hard one, but I feel like the story played it really well. And I know, yeah, Jesse's death was a bit of a shock. That's probably one of the most shocking deaths because you're just running through and then boom, Abby caps you.
And that's
And
the
it's
thing.
just out of nowhere.
And that's what I think a lot of YouTubers and other content creators are really upset about with that. I mean, I didn't have much of a connection to Jesse. I don't, his character wasn't too fleshed out as what I felt it could have been. Obviously, it's a long game, but to tell two halves of a story, in two different characters' eyes, it's hard to actually get connections to those characters. So that's why I feel like Abby's side of the story, although the gameplay was amazing, the combat was really good and really fun. Abby's side of the story with the scars and helping out Lev and his sister, that was really interesting. But to make her characters and her friends feel like they actually mattered, it just didn't work for me, unfortunately. So it didn't bother me too much when I saw Mel and Owen get killed off. Although it was a bit of it is obviously with Mel being pregnant, it is a bit of a shocker. But it's the same side with Ellie's side of the story, like Dina and Jesse. I mean, obviously they're meant to mean something to me, but they didn't bother me too much, other than when we thought Tommy got shot as well.
Yeah, I was more shocked when I saw Ellie's friends die than Abby's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. They just wanted to have some shock horror moments, and I think the pregnant death of Mel, that was trying to be a bit of a shock horror because like a bit of a parallel to Dina, and that's why Ellie felt so bad about it.
Yeah, well, you see, like Ellie has like a mental breakdown, which was it shows that she's still human. So, because obviously, like you're saying, the parallel could have been Dina, and so just really, really interesting. And what were your final thoughts? Obviously, the game, like I said, Abby's gameplay was really cool. Like the Rat King in the quarantine zone, like Ground Zero, where the infection not where it first began, but where the first responders took all the infected people that they didn't know were infected. It just the cool little notes, like saying, we've put all the people with the high fevers or the people with bite marks in one area. We're waiting to see if their like temperatures comes down, and you just find out that obviously they did not know what was about to happen. That was such a cool little aspect of the game.
Yeah, it reminded me of the start of Walking Dead where he wakes up in the hospital not knowing anything.
Yeah, and also that's the same as like 28 Days Later. So like has really movies. Yeah. So these like little like throwbacks to these movies and TV shows. It would be really cool because obviously in the first game you play as when the infection first breaks out, when Joel and you're trying to save Sarah and you're with Tommy. Obviously that doesn't work out too well. But I reckon it would be pretty cool if you went back and revisited that one day with maybe a different character, or even if you were to do a prequel with Joel or something like that. But we'll finish up with that soon. But so what are your thoughts on I know a lot of people were upset, obviously, with just after Jesse being killed, and like you just don't know what's about to happen. It goes to cuts to black, and you play as Abby, and you find out her backstory. Then you play her time before that moment when you and Ellie when you face off again. That gameplay was obviously really awesome. We've spoken about the Rat King and stuff, that little boss battle. But what were your thoughts on playing as Abby against Ellie straight after that situation?
Up until like you started learning Abby's backstory, I hated Abby. But then after playing the game more, I think Abby is a better character than Ellie.
Yeah, it's not so much a revenge story. I mean, obviously, she wanted revenge for her father, but then you find out that I think the game tries to convince you that she's not a bad person, but then obviously Mel sort of says, "Oh, you're Isaac's top scar killer," and you're okay. So she obviously has a very unique skill that is just running through hordes of the scars. In saying that, I just want to harp back to one of the missions. That mission when you are being strung up by the scars and you get saved by Lev and his sister,
Yeah,
and
that's
you're
sweet.
running through the forest with the little little torch, and you got this infected coming out, and you just have to use like bricks and bottles to like bash their heads in. That was a really cool gameplay.
That was one of
Like,
the coolest missions in the game.
yeah, going through that little forest in the darkness, it was just so cool because it's like really like survival, bare knuckles kind of battle survival thing. But yeah, but anyways, back to it. Obviously they want to make you try and feel for Abby, and obviously find out that maybe she isn't that best. So everyone has flaws in this world. Nobody's perfect, and obviously the good people that try to do right by everyone, they're the ones that probably die first in this kind of world because it's just a brutal and backstabbing kind of world. So obviously when you start to understand both sides of the story, when I got to that point there, I was like, I was wondering if we were going to be fighting as one or the other, and I knew that we wouldn't be allowed to choose, but fighting as Abby against Ellie, a lot of people I knew were upset about that.
Oh, I didn't have a problem with it. I thought it was necessary. It was always going to end like that.
Yeah, I do agree. And the final battle actually is quite fun because obviously Ellie is the younger, she's not as trained and as hardened as Abby, even though she's been through a lot. Abby has been training her like ever since her father passed away for like the last 4 years, training to find Joel and kill him. And that's why she's obviously, She-Hulk.
Oh yeah, she's jacked as shit, man. She's huge.
So having the battle against Ellie when Ellie has all the weapons and stuff was kind of fun. And then obviously you have that little battle.
Where she
At
almost
the
caves Dina's head in.
Yeah, that was so brutal. I was like, oh my gosh, we're watching Dina's head like slowly get bashed in. I was like, this is, and then she obviously holds a knife to her, and obviously she's about to kill her, and then Lev's like, no, obviously he's saying there's been enough bloodshed, and then after Ellie's like, like just on the ground with a broken arm, like she could be finished off just as quick. She lets Dina live and Ellie live, sorry, and she says, if you ever see you again, I'm obviously gonna finish you off. And so that just shows the kind of person that Abby is. Obviously, she's a brutal brute of a character. But she let Tommy and Ellie live in that first scene when they killed Joel. And obviously she does say, I've let you guys live and you've wasted it. And that's when Tommy jumps up to save her, and obviously he gets an arrow to the knee, good throwback to Skyrim, and obviously gets shot in the side of the face, which we thought we killed him at the time. That's why everyone was so enraged. Obviously, he goes on to survive in the epilogue. But yeah, I think it shows that Abby has grown as a character and that she is willing to let them leave, even though like she's been killing scars and her own people up until that point. And this one girl and Tommy obviously have killed a majority of her friends. She's still able to get over the fact because she's learned that there's just too much death in the world at the moment, and it seems like so she lets them live, whereas Ellie can't give up.
Abby's definitely got her head screwed on a bit more. Like they're obviously both murderers, but she's less of a murderer, I guess. Doesn't seek it out. She only does it because she likes her job.
Yeah, and so when she leaves them, you feel like she's grown as a character more than Ellie has, because Ellie obviously lost and accepted the loss, and then has that little part where they're on the farm and Ellie has PTSD, and I definitely felt that could have been the end of the game. I definitely felt that they could have said, Ellie's gonna have to live with this PTSD for the rest of her life.
That's where it should have ended.
Yeah, obviously Tommy rocks up, and when I thought that was a really good, had Dina stood up for her and said, you can't come here and keep doing this. She needs to move on. We're struggling here, and we need her Ellie needs to get better. And I thought, okay, just end it there. That's really good. And then it showed you play as Abby again, and obviously she gets attacked. And I thought they could have ended that there too, and just left on a cliffhanger, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, because Tommy must have obviously been going there a lot with different leads and stuff, and Dina's just had enough of it.
It's just really strange to see that Tommy was willing to accept letting her go. Obviously, shoot him in the face. Obviously, made him change his opinion.
Yeah, I think he's a bit bitter about losing and getting snuck up on, but Abby was just better than him.
That's the thing. I'm obviously he did a lot of damage to the WLF, but I was just really sad to see that Tommy had so him and Maria sort of have a falling out, and he's just stuck on, the revenge kind of thing, even though that looked like he'd given it up by the time that incident happened. But I just don't understand why they continued on from there. They could have just left it at that. Obviously, more is not always going to be better. I didn't mind the combat because those new enemies were just like a different kind of group, which was good to see. But I just don't agree with that last sort of battle you have with Abby, like the sort of last. Well, you both like, obviously Abby is like on the last leg. She's like malnourished. She had no muscle left. She looks like absolute shit. And then Ellie's obviously had her fair share of, like, she got impaled on that bloody tree.
Yeah.
I just don't agree with that final battle. I just don't know. Like, I know how. I don't agree with. I don't agree with why that happened that way. I would have been happy if we just freed her and sort of just let her go instead of having that fight. But I can understand why they want to do it because they want to make Ellie like have that choice in her hands. Obviously, when she was drowning her, to like, let her live or to finish her off. And letting her live has shown that she's grown past it. That it's time to move on.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It was good. It was good. I would have preferred to end at the farm, but it didn't, and that's what we got. So
I think a lot of people were upset how they didn't get the choice to actually kill Abby or let her live. But I'm glad it ended the way it did because it shows that these two characters had come together for reasons that were exactly the same. Where Joel killed Abby's father, she seeked revenge, killed Joel, and Joel was Ellie's father figure. So it was more like a clash of an eye for an eye, what we said earlier. But when does it stop? And we said the same, and I said the same thing, is that these two girls, with their conflicts, got heaps of their friends killed. Not heaps, but like important people in their lives killed. When they could have just, Ellie could have just taken it and left it, and it would have been a bitter pill to swallow. But she has other people that are around her. Yes, Joel wasn't the perfect character. He wasn't the perfect man. He did what he did to protect her. But was it the right decision? I guess it all comes down to your own opinion.
yeah, and yeah, I don't know. I don't even know what else to add to it. Like, very good game. A lot of risky choices the developers made, but overall, I very much enjoyed myself playing it.
Over the two games, I think it's a great story. And I think overall, if you haven't played either of them, even though you've been listening to this podcast, please go play both of them. The remastered on PlayStation 4s of The Last of Us Part 1, or just The Last of Us, sorry, is exceptionally well done. And Part 2, obviously coming out this year, has been a roller coaster of emotions. I couldn't put it down. I just wanted to find out what happened next, and I just played it for hours on end. But yes, my overall review is that it's not quite a masterpiece, but it's in the top tier of games I've played in my entire gaming life cycle.
And now moving on to another heavy hitter on PS4 that I'm currently addicted to, like Scad was addicted to The Last of Us, is Ghosts of Tsushima. What are your like bang on first impressions just of the game? Because we're only a couple hours in each. We've only done a few missions, but yeah, what are your thoughts?
Well, if you've listened to our first podcast, you saw that we sort of chalked it up as not too impressive. And boy, were we wrong.
It is wicked.
We both agreed that it just didn't show enough in that gameplay. Little snippet that they gave us at the start of June, I believe it was, maybe. It just showed that I'm glad we were wrong, if you know what I mean. That when I first played this game, I mean, I got really worried in that first little scene when you're fighting on the beach, which is like the prologue. I had frame rate drops and it was like jittering around. I was getting really worried because, like we're saying, you're on the original PlayStation 4, and so am I. And so I was like, crap, do I need to buy PlayStation 4 to actually play this game? PlayStation 4 Pro, sorry, to play this game, because I was getting lag on screen lag. Like, it's the first time in such a long time I've had it.
Yeah, I didn't experience any of those issues, but yeah, I don't know. All those gameplays left a heaps bitter taste in my mouth, but playing it, it is wild.
Yeah, that frame rate was only for that one beach scene. I haven't experienced it since, so it must have just been too much stuff on the screen at once. The TV could have exploded. I don't know. But overall, so far, this game is an amazing game, like amazingly well done. I find that at the very beginning, I thought the graphics were good in some areas and not flash in the others. But I keep exploring the world, and I just keep stopping and looking around because it's such a beautiful and vibrant world.
Oh yeah, yeah. This game is unreal. There's so much variety in areas. Like I've been in like forests. I've been in like open fields. I've been in like flower meadows. I've been on beaches, in forts, castles. is it's just such a variety. Like, obviously, it's one island in Japan, so it's not going to be you're not going to get a desert and then like snowy peaks and mountains, but
Yeah.
it's definitely such a good variety of areas to fight in and explore, and it's very detailed. It's so packed with everything. Like you
Yeah.
can go into any building, any house, almost cut through the paper walls. Reminds me of like the when the Simpsons went to Japan and Homer's just walking through all the walls. But yeah,
um, but yeah,
very detailed.
the scenery is just beautiful, and the lore is so deep and rich, and it just has so much to offer. And there's so many NPCs around the area where you can go talk to them, and they give you like every second one will give you a mission. And sometimes that can be a bad thing, but it's so cool because Japanese folklore is amazing. Like, obviously, there's like they talk about the spirit. There's like I did one in the forest, and they talk about those spirits and ghosts in there. You find out that's not the case, but the idea of it, I was like, this is really cool. And I think I saw there was because it's a westernized game, so it was made by a Western developer. So they had to gather all the information from like correspondence. Um, I think it got I can't remember what it was, but there's like some kind of approval rating that it can get from like the Japanese something. It must be something to do with the gaming, but it's the third game ever, or a westernized game that has been approved that has like accurate information in the game.
Is that similar to? Is that what Witcher got? Because they had a lot of like European folklore in it.
I believe so.
Yeah, something like that.
But it's such a yeah, but like I said, this world is so rich, and the combat is, and so this is one thing we harped on about in the when we spoke about the gameplay trailer was that like we thought it would just be like Assassin's Creed with the samurai or Japan kind of vibe, Japanese, sorry, but it's definitely not. They actually haven't done a great job on the stealth kind of combat. It's very very minuscule, so it doesn't matter if you try to sneak into say an encampment and you get found out. The combat won't stay like you don't stay in a situation where you'll be fighting as like a ninja or an assassin. You still fight like a samurai, which is it's really fun. The samurai gameplay is some of the best I've ever played.
Oh yeah, I've played every sword game like Witcher, Sekiro, Neo. Like we've played them all. The combat in this is so satisfying, and like when you swing your sword and cut into someone, you feel it. It's like visceral. It's got good
Yeah,
feedback.
the standoff feature is really cool. I mean, at the start, I was like, "Oh, this is pretty bland," but it actually helps you out a lot when you can take that first enemy out. And obviously, I've just unlocked recently, like just today, as we're recording this podcast, the second ability where you can chain them together.
Yeah, I just
And
got that as well.
yeah,
So
so
handy.
obviously you can do one extra person, and now I think obviously you can get another 2 and 3. Like, so you might be able to get possible like 4 to 5 people killed off in the standoff situation, which would be really cool.
Yeah, yeah, I really enjoy that feature because you can like sneak around a base and like kind of survey it and find out where everyone is, and you can enter where the strongest enemy is and put him in a standoff, so you can take out a really really hard enemy straight away.
Yeah, and the travel, like you know how you've played games and you unlock fast travel and you just decide you just go, oh yeah, no worries, press triangle and fast travel to that area. I've only used it a couple times because it's been like one end of the map to the other. But I really enjoy just riding the horse and finding like enemies like bandits or Mongols to fight like just in the middle of the walking trail. Or you see like because this is the thing we spoke about is like, you know, the whole foxes and the wind and like the animals in but there's all these things that are the best part of the game.
Yeah, I hated all that stuff watching the videos, but in practice, it's very good. The wind's pretty fun.
Yeah, but I like the idea of how you can just like we have like the yellow bird and like it just flies away and um it shows you the like to like a I think it's like the I forget what it's called now. But it's where you can go and, you know, create your headbands by you know looking over the scenic area.
Yeah. Oh, the vanity shit. Yeah.
Yeah, the vanity stuff. So overall, and we're like comparing it to The Last of Us. The Last of Us, I was 100% playing through it just to find out what was happening next in the story. The combat was enjoyable just to play through and do it. But what I'm finding with this game, with Ghosts of Tsushima, is that the story is there. It's quite an open story as well. So you can do bits and pieces as you go. You can do so many side stories, and there's lots of side stuff as well.
Oh, the
Um,
mythic side quests are the best thing I've played so far. Not even the main story. The mythic stuff is wicked. If anyone is playing it right now, stop what you're doing. Do mythic.
yeah, the mythic stories, I've done 2 of them so far. and I've done the one that you spoke about with the armor, which was a really good, and that looks so beautiful in the what was I
The
forget what
purple
the
chrysanthemums.
yeah. That was really cool. That was really cool, and the battle after that is really good fun as well. But the one where I did the Heavenly Strike mythic, like you're going through this mission to find out what happened to this person. I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's about learning a new technique, and it is so cool. Like the backdrop for where the final battle takes place is just really cool, and the boss battles are really good because it's like a proper Japanese like samurai standoff.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of anime, like because
Yeah,
there's always like the wide angle shots that like shows the entire little arena, shows both characters. It's really
yeah,
awesome.
and it's like it's a stare down, and then it's just like who is the fastest is normally the victor. Obviously, the boss battles you take a little bit more. They're more like sponges, they take a bit of damage, but it still feels like a movie. Like the game feels like you're playing like you're watching a movie.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
but yeah, and I like all the skins for the weapons and obviously the different outfits. We're only like so far into the game at the moment, but it just shows us so much to this game, and I'm so glad that they we they our opinions have changed obviously because of what they've produced is not what we may have seen in that trailer. Like it obviously is very similar to what we've seen, but it is so much more deeper than we thought.
Yeah, it's hard to compare, as you said, to Last of Us because that's like a linear story-based game, and this is like an open world RPG kind of game. But based on first impressions, I'm more of a fan of Ghosts than I am Last of Us.
Yeah, and I mean, I do have to agree with you. I'm enjoying. I really had because I really love. I mean, I've smashed out the Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2 within a month. So like, I'm so involved in that, and so like, I'm buying into that world. Um, but obviously, it only has so much replay value. So like, once you play through the main story, that's all you're really playing it for. Obviously, with Ghosts, you have that combat that's really likable. You have that mythic quest. You have so many other quest lines you can do, and the world is so rich and the environment is so cool that I have to agree that maybe, yeah, I am enjoying Ghosts a little bit more than I did The Last of Us. But not in saying that The Last of Us was a great game and you should definitely play it. But it is crazy to think that these two games are coming out at the very end of the PlayStation 4's life cycle. Like, they next gen is just around the corner, and they brought out two big hitting games, and they actually knocked them out of the park. Like, obviously, people were a bit upset with The Last of Us a bit, but if you played The Last of Us and you haven't bought Ghosts, go buy a Ghost straight away because you will finish on a happy feeling, I think.
Like, if you are tossing up between Last of Us and Ghosts, there's not a bad choice to make. Play either, and you're going to have a wicked time. If you want some longevity, I'd go Ghosts. But if you want a really, really concise story, I'd go Last of Us. But that's just like we obviously, because we have podcasts and we just enjoy video games, we're going to play everything. So you'll get our opinions, but still,
Play
definitely
both.
play one. At least play one of them to finish off the PS4.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they've done so well. I'm like Sony have done knocked like the exclusives out of the park this generation, and I think that they're going to start off for next generation as well. So I just can't wait to see what they bring out next. And I just want to finish. I just want to keep playing Ghosts. Like I just can't put it down at the moment. It's so enjoyable, so fun. Um, yeah, first impressions are just completely different to what I was expecting, and I'm so happy that's the way it is.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to end it. That was a pretty good podcast. For people listening, we had a bit of trouble recording the Last of Us chat. We didn't really know how to articulate our thoughts in a concise manner.
We just
But
weren't. I mean, I wasn't happy with it because I
yeah,
spoke most of the time, and I think I did it again a bit today. But yeah, we want to try and produce the best we can, and we both agreed that it probably wasn't as good as we thought it could be. And not saying I think today's was a little bit better, it was a bit more narrowed down. So, but yeah, I mean, we're playing games, we're doing stuff, and like we said, we still need to have a chat about. We're just gonna start now. We've been building gunplay.
yeah.
If people don't know what that is, or gunpla, I should say, um, it is we're building model kits of Gundams, and if you've seen the Gundam anime, you know it's a really cool mecha series. There's plenty of them, so we're going to give our first impressions on our building our own Gundams in the last month or so.
And for the few people that have never heard of Gundam, I don't know what you're doing. They look like Transformers, and we're building model kits that are very detailed.
Yeah, and
Like,
it's
yeah, hard to build.
we're trying something different. You know, we love our video games and we love our movies and TV shows, but yeah, Nick's an avid fan of collecting figurines, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah. Hot Toys, 1/6 scale figures, like high end kind of stuff.
So, and the thing is, I built a few Zoids back in the day, but like I was young and I wasn't that flash. Bionicles are pretty lit, and I used to build a few of them.
Oh yeah, Bionicles are wicked. We should do a review of Mask of Light, the original movie.
That's a great film. Absolutely love that film. But
That would be a funny review.
But in saying that, yeah, the Gundam kits are a little bit more detailed and a little bit more difficult. So we are looking forward to talking about that. So we're going to stop it right now. Otherwise, we'll reveal too much. So overall, thanks for joining us today. Nick, any last words?
Get keen for the next episode.
Yeah. So yeah, guys. Also, we're obviously on YouTube is out. We upload all our videos, but we're also on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcasts. So if you use any three of those, go listen to us on there. It would help us out massively, and obviously any likes and subscribes on YouTube helps us out as well. We're just powering along, and I hope you guys are enjoying it. Cheers.